All right, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Bruins Diehards podcast. We've never done this before. It's something new. I have a guest here, Mike Commito, author of Bruins 365. We're going to talk a little Bruins. We're going to talk a lot about his book. We're going to do some questions. He's only got a half an hour, but I'm going to give you all the time I have here today. But welcome to the show, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me, Court. It's honor to be here, especially as the first pod of Bruins Diehards. So I have to set the bar high, I guess, right? Or low, and then you can surpass it with the next time you do this. So
yeah, it's funny. I've had a lot of people in the community have asked for this because I only do just the videos on YouTube as of right now. And I said I'll get to it eventually. And then talking to you through DMs, I'm like, you know what? Better time than anything. Let's just get to it. Don't know if I'm going to do it a lot, but we'll see what we go from there. But things I want to talk about today on the show. I want to talk about McAvoy injury, the Bruins injuries. I want to talk about the Atlantic Division and how they're, it's kind of the worst division in hockey. Mike being a Leafs fan, so we can discuss that. You can roast him in the comments. Okay, we're going to talk about his book. We have some questions, so we'll even have questions that are directed to you, Mike. Mike's only got about a half an hour, but I will do some more stuff after the fact. But let's just jump right into it. So Charlie McAvoy the other night in Montreal took a 93 mile per hour, according to NHL Edge, shot to the face, deflected off Mark Kastelik's stick. Lost a couple chiclets because you can see that pretty much in the video. He got surgery on his face. He is week to week. I don't know what that means, but the good news is reports are already coming out that he will be playing in time for the Olympics. Now, as a hockey fan, Mike, what do you think the impact is for the Boston Bruins without McAvoy, someone of his ilk? Because it's interesting. As you probably can tell with the Bruins fans, we're very self-deprecating. And I know you Leaf fans are as well. And with McAvoy out of the lineup, we have some people saying, oh, that's a good thing, especially when Hampus Lindholm was down. I kind of looked at some of the numbers. With McAvoy in the lineup, the Boston Bruins are 322, 142, and 59. Without him in the lineup, 106, 70, and 23. Not a terrible record, not a great record, but I think he's a key piece to the Bruins back end. But I just wanted to hear your opinion on it as someone who's outside looking in.
Yeah, no, I think just looking at those numbers, but I think certainly what he brings to the table, like especially with some of the struggles they've had earlier in the season with the defense not necessarily looking, as strong as you'd like it to be in front of your goaltender. So having him out of the lineup for, again, if we're hoping that he's back in time for the Olympics, I don't know what his projected time is to get back, onto the NHL roster, but having a player like him out with his caliber, what he contributes and what I think that then does to the rest of the decor, right? Because again, I think it's obviously you take a piece out and you move a new piece in and you can maybe like plug that hole, but ultimately like having his pedigree on that back end and then all of a sudden it's gone, that trickles down to whoever else is playing, in his absence, right? So I think to lose that, the leadership, obviously the skill, everything else he brings, like to think that that's not going to have an impact. Again, I think it's the record kind of speaks to that they can weather the storm, but certainly this is a big piece to weather. So it's concerning, but I mean, ultimately, you just got to take it day by day or week to week in this case. Again, I think obviously USA fans are breathing a sigh of relief that timetable wise, again, unless there's any setbacks, it should be good to go. For the Olympics again, hopefully he's able to do that for sure. Cause we saw, him getting some time with Four Nations last year, but ultimately not being able to really compete at the full level. Right. So you hope that he's there. It's good for hockey to have the best players available for stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's very interesting when the Bruins lost Hampus Lindholm at the beginning of the year. They faltered big time. We are now 0-1. We've lost a game with McAvoy in the lineup against Anaheim. I actually thought the Bruins were in that game in period 2 and 3. I thought the first period they just out to lunch. Korpisalo unfortunately let in the first shot of the game. That's 6 times this year that he has done that. The Bruins have done it 11 times. Korpisalo's let in 6 of them. They are. If you're any team playing the Boston Bruins, just know that you're probably going to score on the first 2 shots of the game, which is unfortunate this year. But the Bruins defense has been a strong point for this team, especially under Marco Sturm. And with McAvoy out of the lineup, they could have lied down against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, who are surprisingly one of the best teams in the NHL. But if you look at their roster, it's kind of hard not to understand why they're there. I know they took all the leftovers from the New York Rangers, but they took heart and soul guys and they mixed it with their youth. And I think they've done a very good job. It's probably what the Leafs wanted to do in the last couple of years, and even what the Bruins want to do right now. I think both the Bruins and the Leafs are kind of in turmoil right now, and kind of almost trying to find their identity. I thought the Bruins had found their identity, especially with how they've been playing. But losing a guy like McAvoy, losing a guy like Arvidsson, Elias Lindholm was on the road with them, but we don't know when he's going to play. The Bruins right now and the whole Atlantic are pretty much injured. It's kind of crazy when you look at the Atlantic right now. You have so many teams jockeying for position, but at the same time, I've actually been shocked on how much you kind of look at this standings right now. So you have the Red Wings, the Lightning, the Senators. The Bruins are in fourth, but if I click over and put in the percentage, the Bruins all of a sudden come right down to the bottom of the division, just like the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's very interesting. If you look at the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens, they're all riddled with injuries right now.
Yeah.
And the Bruins losing McAvoy, I have a hard time thinking they're going to be able to weather this storm, especially with a guy like Victor Arvidsson out and Elias Lindholm now. I think it's a lot. And I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, and their defense is pretty much on the IR right now.
Yeah.
I think Tanev's coming back soon, I believe. I guess he's kind of like skating with the team.
Yeah.
But it's kind of very interesting this season. The Atlantic Division has always been the powerhouse. The Tampa Bay Lightning are on a roll. They won 2 in a row. They're 7-3-0 in their last 10. They're playing a lot better hockey. Ottawa Senators are playing decent hockey. But if you look at these teams, they're all about 500 pretty much, the whole division, even the Buffalo Sabres, and they're all pretty much knocking on the door of a playoff spot at the point. And usually at this time, you can see a lot of separation at the American Thanksgiving or the turkey drop. As some call it in university, you can call it that in NHL. If the team is not in the playoffs, they usually don't make it. But if I look at this division, you have 3 teams that are not at a negative goal differential. It's kind of crazy. So what has been your take on the Atlantic Division this year compared to what you probably thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I think this has probably been the wonkiest we've seen it in quite some time. I mean, as far as I can remember, again, like you're looking at that, other than the Sabres, like everyone is within, a couple games of first place in the Atlantic, right? Toronto's number 7 right now, but they're, 4 points back of the Red Wings just by points alone, right? And again, I think even a few weeks ago, like the Lightning were in a bit of a skid and people were talking about, the Lightning cooked, and now they, win a couple games in a row. Now they're, holding down a top spot in the division. I think, teams like Ottawa, we knew that they were going to take a step forward. I think obviously the Bruins are a little surprising right now with where they are. I think everyone can probably readily admit to that. The Panthers have definitely been surprising as well. They've also played a lot of hockey in the last 3 years. So I feel like a regression, and also freak injuries. Barbecuing is now apparently, we got a rule like no more barbecuing, no more going out to steakhouses. Everyone just stay home and, order Uber Eats or skip the dishes and avoid any of these injuries. And then, and then you've got the Leafs and the Habs, right? And again, I think the injuries are a big part of this. Again, Toronto going to the season, I knew that they were going to be in a bit of a reckoning, obviously losing a big piece like Marner. But I think the things that I was worried about Toronto aren't even the things that I'm worried about right now. I think you mentioned identity. I don't know what this team is. I don't think they know what they are. They're slow, but they're also injured. They just don't really have the compete that, again, you would hope that a team would have an answer to after Marner goes, and now they've got to answer, what does this regular season look like without him? We're all kind of hoping that we're really going to see what the impact of having Marner move out is going to have on the playoffs. But then now you're thinking, like, are they even going to make the playoffs? Because that was really the whole point of this, was finally once and for all deal with this distraction. He's ready for a fresh start. He deserves that. Great. But if you don't get into the playoffs, then what was all of this even for? Again, it's very early, but it is right around that cutoff where typically, historically, if you're not in a playoff picture by this point, it's very hard to get in. We've obviously seen outlying years when teams like the St. Louis Blues, their last place come New Year's Eve and they storm off, and we know how that season ends with the Stanley Cup. But we don't have to talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. But it's crazy. And I mean, even if you look at like the Metropolitan Division as well, like there's still like very closely bunched as well. So it's the East as a whole is, I think, having a bit of a year. but certainly within the Atlantic, there's a lot of moving pieces right now. So I think it's a battle to see who gets healthier again, see who can figure out exactly who they are and what they are as a team. And I think whoever figures that out early gets that formula. They're going to be at a great advantage. But right now, like this is, I don't think anybody thought going to the season we'd be having this conversation of like just a few points here and there separating anywhere between 1 to 7 in the division.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I didn't expect the Boston Bruins to be good at all this year. I'll be the first to admit it. And I feel, unfortunately, right, I didn't expect the Toronto Maple Leafs to be that good this year. I thought the loss of Mitch Marner was going to be a huge loss for them,
Mhm.
especially if you look at the percentage of how much Mitch Marner assists on Austin Matthews goals. If you look at Austin Matthews goals that have gone down, he's obviously injured. He's injured
Yeah.
out right now, but there's obviously something going on with that guy. My thing with Austin Matthews is I feel he is the most Brett Hall player in the NHL. He can be that guy to score your goals. He just can't be that guy to get you there. He needs to be a piece, not the piece. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. You got Tavares playing real well, but
Yeah.
as a Bruins fan, we are very happy that the Toronto Maple Leafs aren't playing that well. We just don't want you in the top 5. As long as you're, 6 to 10, we'll take it. We'll take it. I think the Bruins, looking at their percentage, 12 wins, 10 losses. Now they got McAvoy out. Arvidsson's out for a little bit now, and he has been playing
Yeah.
phenomenal for us. I joke to everybody on my show saying that Arvidsson, we're just waiting to see what we can get from him at the trade deadline. And now, unfortunately, we just want him back in the lineup because he's become an integral piece. McAvoy was an integral piece in the locker room, but I think Zadorov is kind of like taken over that mantle as a leader in the room. We have a show that we watch. It's called Behind the B for the Bruins. You get to see everything that's going on. And
Mhm.
Pasternak and Pasternak and Zadorov have been real leaders. And so the Bruins have an identity, but unfortunately, they also have the injuries. The Leafs, I don't know if they have an identity. The
They
Montreal Canadiens, I've been saying this for a couple days now. They're frauds. They're unfortunate. They can't beat playoff teams, and their goaltending is terrible. And they've kind of come back down to earth.
Yeah.
Brad Marchand is on a mission in Florida. He's pretty much saying, "I'm making Team Canada, and that it is what it is." Uh, he's leading the NHL in goals, along with Morgan Geekie, sorry, from the Boston Bruins, which is hilarity in itself. Geekie's got like a 27% shooting percentage. He
Yeah.
was 67% the other night against Anaheim. That is not going to continue, but he's going to score a lot of goals. And then you've got Tampa, who looks like the best team in the division.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like, I think, like Arvidsson's a guy that I think going into this, like he's a type of player that you always hope that he's going to stay healthy. When he was in LA, at the time I was doing some like coverage for the Kings, and just one of those guys where, again, when he's on, and you saw that I think early in the season where it's like, this is exactly, I think, what the Oilers hoped he would be last year, what past teams have hoped he would be. Again, he hasn't really been able to get back to that 30 goal form that he had in Nashville, but he's a player who, when he's on and he's great. And just a hilarious guy. I had the chance to talk to him, and he talked about how he's a big fisher, like big fisherman. Loves to do that when he's back home in Sweden. He talked about this one day where his commitment to fishing, he had all these appointments lined up, but the bite was on that day. He was just pulling fish into the boat. So he skipped the whole day, just spent the entire day on the lake just because the bite was so good. So a guy like that, he's hard not to root for. So again, hoping he comes back soon. Just got his 200th career goal, before going down. But yeah, it's the geeky stuff is interesting too, because I've got a close eye on him because I really I get a kick out of the whole Cy Young thing in the NHL. And I actually put out something today that he's now at the top of the clubhouse leaderboard. Kiefer Sherwood in Vancouver was doing a great job, but he's getting assists now. He's got 3 assists in his last 2 games. That's not the kind of Cy Young behavior we want to see, but Geeky's now up there with 14 and 6. So
Weird, eh? It's
yeah,
like, it's funny because he plays with Pasternak.
yeah, yeah,
You would think, but it's Pasta assisting on his goals,
yeah,
and Pasternak's getting a lot of rebounds or, getting something from the point and then taking the shot. It's very interesting the role that Geeky has now played with David Pasternak, and he's become a better hockey player for it. We saw the development of Pasternak playing with Bergeron and Marchand over the years and what he became as a player. And
mhm,
now Pasternak is literally doing the same thing for Geeky. And I was even seeing people today and they talked about it on Chicklets. They were talking about how like Geeky should be in the consideration for Team Canada, and instantly, I appreciate people saying that, but I think it's a little just not yet. I just don't think
Yeah.
he's Team Canada material yet. Unfortunately, he's young. He's what, 28 years old, but I just think there's a lot more players that could play on Team Canada instead of him.
Well, I think we're still even. I think the debate is kind of closing now. But I mean, a few weeks ago there was a debate on whether or not Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini are they going to make Team Canada, right? So again, if we're kind of having debates on whether those guys are going to make it, and then again, with all deference and respect to Morgan Geeky, I think you got to let the debate settle on some of those other guys first. And I think based on how they've been playing recently, especially with their dueling hat tricks the other night, like I think the only question is just can they play that 200-foot game that we need them to play, in the dying minutes of an Olympic gold medal game, perhaps. Again, I think they can, but I think that's probably the only reason why people have been a little bit cagey about determining whether or not they could make that team. Certainly the point production wise is there, especially this year, but it's just, do they have that complete game that I think everyone kind of has to have if you're going to make, Team Canada come Four Nations, Olympics, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think unfortunately with Geeky, I think it's almost like too little, too late. I think he needed a couple seasons. I see a guy like Brad Marchand making the team. I think Bedard and Celebrini are pretty much locks at this point to make the team, but Geeky's having a phenomenal season, and he could be rewarded with the All-Star game. I think that's where we're at with him. He is a integral part to the Boston Bruins. He probably got one of the best contracts in the NHL right now, besides Brad Marchand's, with regards to what you're getting on output with what you're paying him. But I think Geeky's going to be fine. I think he's on pace for 50, but he ain't going to get that. But I think he's going to get probably a career high in goals this year. I think it's easy to say that he's going to do that. I think his shooting percentage will come down, but he's playing great. But I know you don't have a lot of time. You've only got 10 more minutes. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about your book, Bruins 365. Just why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about what they should be getting? Mine's in the mail, so I'm just waiting for it to get here.
Okay, we're hoping it arrives quickly, but yeah, as the title implies, it's Bruins 365, which means there's 365 short stories about the Boston Bruins, one for every day of the year. There's actually 366. We throw in a bonus one for leap year, so there is 366. It just doesn't have the same ring to it, but it follows a formula that I started doing. I started writing hockey books in 2018. My first one was Hockey 365, which had 365 short stories about anything in hockey history, NHL, international hockey. There was something there. Every day of the year was a different anniversary milestone. We did 2 of those, and then I did a Leafs 365 where I kind of took that format and just condensed it into a smaller version, but focusing on the Leafs. And then we did Habs 365 last year, and then Bruins 365. But I think where the viewers will appreciate this is that after those 2 team books, the publisher said, let's do Wings 365. And I was like, no, if we're going to do it anymore, like the next one I'm doing is Bruins 365. And as a Leafs fan saying that, that's obviously shocking. But I've got a lot of connections locally where I am in Sudbury, Ontario. And for me, it just seemed like a natural fit that if we were going to go anywhere else with this series, that I had to cross the Bruins off the list. A lot of local guys have come through from Sudbury that have played for the Bruins. One of those guys, Jerry Topazzini, was a penalty killing specialist, back in the day in the 50s and 60s for the Bruins, made some stops in Detroit and Chicago as well. But after he was finished playing, he came back to Sudbury. He founded a bar called the Beef and Bird, which still exists. And it was the local watering hole when I was, in my 20s. Every Friday night, like you were at the Beef and Bird. And then every Saturday, you were also at the Beef and Bird because they do this great thing called Porchetta Bingo, where they bring in a porchetta roast from Torini's. So it's like Italian pork roast that's been just like sitting in its juices all day. And you get 3 cards that are on a laminated sheet. And then you've got a caller at the front of the room that has just a deck of cards. And all he's doing is just ripping off cards. And if you get your 3 cards called, you yell out porchetta, and then you go up, you claim your prize, which is just like a tray of porchetta and bread. And by that point of the day, you've just only been drinking beer. You probably haven't eaten anything because you're relying on winning porchetta to feed your table. It is the best thing that you've ever eaten at that point and at any point in your life. And it's just the best. It is a Bruins stronghold still. Jerry passed away, I think in 2011. His family still runs the bar, but you go there and you're in Bruins territory. They've got the smoked bee outside as part of the sign, and then inside you've got pictures of Jerry, pictures of Phil Esposito, Bobby Orr, Ray Bourque. Justin Williams was or is, I guess, Jerry Topazzini's great nephew. So a lot of Justin Williams stuff as
Mr.
well.
Game
But
7 himself.
exactly. So it's a fun place. So again, I had a lot of awesome memories there. Many things I've forgotten over the years, but ultimately a lot of Bruins things kind of aligned in my life, where I'm like, I got to do this book. They've obviously hurt me many times throughout the years, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of what I think is a good story and some good history.
Well, it's interesting you say that about Ontario because myself growing up in Ontario, Oshawa, Ontario is not far where I grew up.
Mhm.
I grew up in Pickering, and Oshawa is a big Bruins town, and it's Bobby Orr for
Yeah.
obvious reasons, and more. There's Nathan Horton played there. Uh, Stadnika played there. There's a lot. There's a lot of guys. I'm probably forgetting a ton, and Dominic Tiano is probably going to hop into my comments and let me know all the guys that I totally forgot that played for the Oshawa Generals. But I find it very interesting that yes, Ontario is Leafs country, but I think it's safe to say that the second favorite team of Ontario is the Boston Bruins.
So, I mean, you've got, I think a lot, especially in a lot of the Franco-Ontarian communities, like you've got a lot of Habs support, but I feel like it definitely, I think you're right, because I've noticed this, at least in the book, where again, Habs fans, I think it's either you come from a French Canadian household or you rooted for the Habs to kind of go against your Leaf cheering parents or grandparents. But like there's Bruins fans all over the place. And I think it goes back to, the early original 6 days, where if you had a player from your hometown that went on and played for that team, like that was a good a reason as any to stop cheering for whoever you might have been cheering for at that time. Like my mom is from the Sioux. Obviously, Phil Esposito and Tony Esposito come from the Sioux. She somehow didn't become a Bruins fan. She chose to be a Leafs fan to kind of go against her Baba. But you go to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and you're going to have a ton of Bruins fans there for Phil Esposito and everything that he did for the franchise. And again, Sudbury, you've got Eddie Shack, and you've got Jerry Topazzini. I had mentioned him already. And even more recently, like Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Foligno, guys like that who've come through. Their time with the Bruins has passed. But I think it's these local connections that really kind of, form a lot of these allegiances. And a lot of these allegiances, go back generations, and that's the reason why this family is a Bruins family, and why they've always kind of stuck with it, just because there was, I think, a player from their hometown, and it didn't have to be a star player like Phil Esposito, but I think having a piece of the team with you in your community, that was the thing to kind of really pull you into a franchise and keep you there, right? So
Well, I'm glad. My hometown from Pickering is Glen Healy, so I'm
yeah.
glad I'm not an Islanders fan or a Leafs fan. But he was a great guy to have a drink with every now and then at a bar. But great guy altogether. But before you go, I wanted to get some quick fire because I did have a huge listener of the show, The Fool in the Rain. He called you Dr. Hockey question mark, but he had a couple quick questions he wanted to fire off, and we got 4 minutes here before you have to jet. He would love to hear more about the 1976 Super Series. Current fans will never believe what Buffalo pulled off against the Soviet team. If you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
I off the top of my head, I don't really have a good answer for the Super Series 76. Like I know it well. I'm thinking of like the Canada Cup in 76 is probably,
Same. That's what came to my head.
yeah.
It's interesting. I've got stuff on my wall in my basement from that era. But unfortunately, my dad he tried out, did not make the team, but we've got stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as what Buffalo did, he's obviously stumped
Well, they
Dr.
had it.
Hockey.
We could say
So
I could talk about they got Gilbert Perreault, Rennie Robert, Richard Martin, the French Connection. One of the best lines during the 70s in
yeah.
hockey. And it's very interesting that those guys played together since they were 8 years old. So when they were all on a line and
Mhm.
everybody was like, "Oh, why are these guys so good?" Yeah, I wonder. They've been playing together their whole lives. Well, but maybe you can go to this one. Would like to hear anything about Bruins lost years, post World War II up into the 1970s. Heck, I got nothing on that one, but if you got anything.
Well, I've got a lot, like in the book for sure.
Mhm.
Again, the book covers everything from the team's like foundation in 1924 up until like I think I included a little reference to the Brad Marchand trade last year.
Oh wow,
Um,
you're way updated, eh? Because that's
well,
probably the biggest trade since Bork.
Yeah, so I mean, and we were there. There was like, there's usually a cutoff point with these books where it's like, how much can we change at this point? Like, I had some stuff written about him like earlier in the book where I'm like, do I have to go back and change all of these stories? I don't think so. There was one where we just made one reference to it, but yeah, I mean, like the period after the Second World War, there's just so many great moments, I think, in franchise history, even like in some of the, some of the down years. But again, I think of things like, Phil Esposito's number being retired is a story in the book that I just love that story so much because, again, he didn't think that Ray Bourque necessarily had to switch numbers in that ceremony. If anyone recalls that, like Bourque had come out to the ice wearing, Phil Esposito's his number 7, and then goes up to Phil, hands him the jersey, takes it right off his back and reveals that he's actually wearing number 77 underneath. And like, there's some genuine surprise on that side because, again, he felt as though he didn't necessarily need to kind of hand that over. But I think Ray Bourque realized that, this is Phil Esposito we're talking about. Like, I'm going to switch numbers.
And I think it's also interesting about that is because back in the day, a lot of the times they didn't have players' names on the numbers, especially when Phil played, even when my dad first broke into the league. But they also didn't keep their jerseys, and I would love to ask Phil Esposito, was that the first time he ever kept a Bruins jersey? Because a lot of the times what happened to these guys, if they got traded because their names weren't on it, there's just the next guy came in, wore that jersey, or they would get their nameplates. So they never, like, I have one of my dad's Bruins jerseys, but like that's because I really had to go and find this darn thing. But like to get all that stuff back in the day, and I remember that moment because my dad is a Bruins fan, and I remember watching that as a kid, and I didn't know really who Phil Esposito was, but I remember the moment, and it's huge. But I don't want to keep you.
Well,
Yep,
I want to give you one more just because I flubbed that first question on
that's
the
okay.
76 Super Series. So the other one post-war that I love this story and it is in the book, but I think it's also just kind of speaks to how hockey players were, built differently back in the day and how obviously the sport has evolved. But 1964, Dean Prentice, he's playing with the Bruins and he gets checked into the boards or he gets tripped up and he goes in the boards head first and he's awarded a penalty shot. But as he gets over, to start lining up for this penalty shot, like he realized like he's actually like in pretty rough shape. His neck is hurting, his back is hurting. Nevertheless, he still gets up. He takes a penalty shot. He scores on that penalty shot goal. Then he ends up going to the hospital. And after the doctors do their full evaluation on him, they realize that he's broken several like vertebrae in his back. So he actually
Oh,
took that penalty shot, scored it with a broken back, ends up going on the IR for months, obviously, while they let his neck and back heal themselves somehow. And then before he goes back to hockey the next season, his summer job, because this is the era where you still have had to have a summer job, his summer job was hauling kegs in a beer warehouse. So again, despite
straight on the
breaking
back.
his, it's like not exactly like a low maintenance light work job that I would be taking if I had broken my back playing hockey, but that's what he did. He was hauling kegs all summer and then he went back and he played the following year. So again, they don't make them like they used to, but I just love that story that he still was able to take that shot with a quote unquote broken back.
Yeah, he makes Bobby Bond's broken leg thing
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
no big deal. Come on, the guy
yeah,
plays with a broken leg. He's like, I had a broken vertebrae and I had
yeah.
no problems. Like, whatever. But Mike, I greatly appreciate you coming by. Everybody go check out his book. I'm going to put everything in the comment section down below and in the description. I'll put a link to it on the Amazon. Please go check out his book. But thanks for coming by, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me, Corp. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. It was great having Mike on the show. I really appreciate it. But I wanted to talk about who from the Boston Bruins roster possibly going to be playing in the Olympics in February. I think it's easy to say that David Pastrnak is going to be playing for Czechia. I will get into the questions later on. I do appreciate everybody dropping in some questions. We'll get into those. And I appreciate Mike coming on. But I think the Elias Lindholm making Team Sweden, I think that's a foregone conclusion. I don't think Andrew Peeke is going to be making Team USA like he did for the World Championship. But I do think Jeremy Swayman is going to be making Team USA. I understand. I saw the news about Hellebuck today that they've put him down and he's going to get hurt, but he's going to get surgery and he's going to be out for a little while. But the reason why I think Swayman actually will still make this team for Team USA, because I think Ottinger and Hellebuck are the ones that are going to play. I think Swayman playing how he did in the World Championship, and if you look at the numbers analytically, he's still playing well enough now to still be that third stringer, because I think his commitment to the program will get him there. We'll see. I do want to hear from all of you. Let me know in the comments down below. I don't really see many other guys. You got Pavel Zacha and you got Pasternak that are definitely going to be making their teams. McAvoy, as long as he's back, is going to be playing for Team USA. Hampus Lindholm will be playing, and Elias Lindholm, I think, will be playing. I think Hampus will probably be an extra defenseman on Team Sweden, but I think those guys are all going to make it. But I don't see a lot of other guys from this Boston Bruins team. They're not exactly the best Boston Bruins team. They're playing good structure hockey for Marco Sturm. I said before they played well enough to win in that Anaheim game. They just, they had a bad first period, I felt. So we'll see. And Zadorov could be playing for his team. Maybe, well, his team's not in the Olympics, so it really doesn't really matter at this point, but I just don't see any other guys. But you let me know in the comments if I'm off base and thinking that Swayman possibly could be that extra guy. But I want to get into the questions because honestly, there's a ton. Okay. There is a lot. And Fool in the Rain, I do apologize. I didn't get to do who do you consider to be the best GM in Bruins history and why. If I went off my thoughts here, I'm not going to say Harry Sinden because I felt Sinden was very hands-on for everything, but at the same time, he was very ownership focused. I think in my era, it's going to be Don Sweeney. And that's only because I've only been around since 1979. So there hasn't been that many GMs in my era. And the reason I say Don Sweeney is because of what he's done with this Bruins team and how many times they've been competitive over the years that he's been the GM. I wasn't a big fan of Peter Chiarelli. I'm not a big fan of everything that Don Sweeney does, but I do think that he's made the team competitive year after year after year. I think some of his shortcomings are, one, maybe he needs to scout a little bit more because the drafting, the GMs always have to lean on their scouts on who they're going to take in a draft. And especially in the 2015 draft, we can get Matt Sweeney all we want. He was already in the organization, but again, you're leaning on your scouts on who to pick. And maybe he needs to, if he wants to really develop this team and really build them, he either needs to hire more scouts or he needs to see more players. I'm not saying he isn't, but trades wise, he's done a very good job. You look at that Carlo trade and it looks fantastic. Like the Bruins could end up getting a first round pick, but that's just me on why I think so far in my time, I wasn't a big fan of Chiarelli. Mike O'Connell just wasn't here long enough. And Sinden, I don't know. He did so many like shady things and weird things over his time here in Boston when I was a fan. So anyways, sorry, I couldn't ask the last any favorite Bruins stories. What I'll do is I'll send him a message and I'll email you that one. Okay. So first question. How many wins do you think it will take for Cam Neely to potentially look at trading for a possible upgrades in order to make a playoff run? I really hope they don't. The Bruins have technically right now 2 first-round picks as long as the Toronto Maple Leafs are not in 1-5. And I think with this Bruins roster, if you look at it, I think as a fan, we should all understand maybe they make the playoffs this year. Maybe they don't. Right now, they're, a 545 winning percentage. It's not the greatest. 12 wins, 10 losses. They're barely over 500. I really hope that the Bruins, if they are going to be making any trades and they are moving picks, it's third rounds and higher, and they're not moving anything in the first 2 rounds. And my actual hope is they make some hockey trades. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Cam is a little hands off this year. And if they're near the trade deadline and say they're knocking on the door of making the playoffs, that Don Sweeney pulls some, like he actually moves players for picks. If they make the playoffs, they do. They don't. Like I have a feeling. Yes, they want to make the playoffs, but I think they're being also realistic this year. That's just my thoughts. Next question. What are your thoughts of Jake DeBrusk being allegedly late for Game 7 in 2019? Hate to relive the past. Do you think that made a lasting impression on Cassidy and the Bruins as a whole? If true, I'm trying to figure out if I need to abstain from this question or not, but if true, that speaks to a lot of Jake DeBrusk more than anybody else. And yes, I wouldn't expect a coach to be happy about it. I know the whole thing with McAvoy before the playoffs, that I believe it was that season when Brad Marchand called him out to the media. That was real. He was calling him out. He was late for stuff. The Bruins are very regimented. They're all pretty much a team. It's no secret that Jake DeBrusk was not a big fan of Bruce Cassidy. That got out everywhere. It's no secret that Trent Frederick wasn't a big fan of Bruce Cassidy. It's very interesting, though. They brought in a players coach in Montgomery, and it didn't work. And they brought in another coach that's almost exactly like Bruce Cassidy and Marco Sturm, who is not afraid to call people out. I don't think Jake DeBrusk would have been a fan of playing for either Marco Sturm as well. Some players don't like criticism. Some players also don't like being told they need to do things. Jake DeBrusk is a very gifted goal scorer. Some say streaky, but I don't think it's that. But I also don't think he was the hardest worker all the time. And I think his defensive laps weren't enough sometimes when he wasn't playing that hard in a game. Yes, he can go out there, and he was great in the playoffs, and that there's no denying that. He played great against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he also didn't play that great against other teams. So the thing about DeBrusk to me was consistency, but if it was true, it says more about his teammates throwing him under the bus to the Spitting Chicklets guys than anything else. I've said this before. When a player leaves a team, it's easy to see whether he had friends or not on that team by just going to their social media and seeing who he's still friends with. It is what it is. I'm not saying Jake DeBrusk is a terrible person or anything like that. I just think his personality didn't mesh a lot with the guys on the team. You see it in Vancouver. It's just unfortunate. He's a very nice person. I think he's a very private guy. And he just didn't take well to being pushed. That's all. No big deal. Next question from Andrew of the Short Shift. Actual questions. Since the Bruins appear to be dead set on a 1.5/1 platooning goal, at what point do you make an attempt to change in backup goalie positions? Surely a waiver pickup or DiPietro call-up would be worth swallowing part of that salary for a chance to improve what has been one of the worst goaltending performances of the year. Korpisalo hasn't been good this year. He hasn't played terrible. It's very interesting with Korpisalo. What I have noticed this year, he is absolutely dog poop in the first period. I don't know what it is. He needs to get going because he plays better as the game goes. He asks for starts, and it's very interesting that they're giving it to him. That was his big complaint in the offseason, and then I personally thought you should just move him at that point. But his biggest complaint is he wanted the net. They're giving him the net, and he's not really showing that he can handle it. But I think it's also working out in Swayman's position because the team isn't that good right now. I was actually surprised that Korpisalo got the start against Anaheim. I really was. They scored on the first shot in 2 minutes and 29 seconds into the game. They also scored on the second shot against Ottawa the time before that, in 1 minute and 28 seconds. I don't know what it is with Korpisalo, but to call up a guy like DiPietro, I don't think DiPietro is NHL ready, and I don't think they have anybody in Providence that they can even call up right now. Providence is firing on all cylinders. They're playing great hockey. I think you don't mess with it. At this point, the goalie market isn't the greatest in the NHL. You have to bet on Korpisalo getting better if you ever think about getting any assets in return for him. I can almost guarantee that the Bruins tried to move him this offseason, and they just didn't have any takers. And in order for you to get anything for this guy, he needs to play better, and he needs to play. So I think the Bruins are hoping for lightning in a bottle with Korpisalo. If he could just figure out how to play a full 60 instead of only 40 minutes, maybe he's going to be better. I think he played a lot better than he last year than he is this year. But we'll see. Like, underlining numbers are bad. Swayman's aren't. If you look at goals against, I know that it is what it is with Swayman and Korpisalo, but that's a team thing. But underlining numbers for Korpisalo, he is one of the worst goalies in the NHL this year. These are just facts. We'll see what the Bruins do, but I don't know what you can do with that. You can't just have that contract just sitting there. So he's got to play better. Gamer Mermaid asks, can the Bruins preserve by staying afloat without McAvoy for a few months? Kind of answered that at the beginning. I think they can if they can get Elias Lindholm back, if they can get Victor Arvidsson back in time. Asperod is played pretty decent. They do play better with Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy in the lineup. I said I thought they played good against Anaheim. We're going to see on this Western road trip. We've got LA Kings are tonight. We'll see. I don't think they can. I think they have far too many injuries right now. It's so much harder to overcome that. You're plugging in guys like Viel's coming in and out of the lineup. Like, it's just they're grasping at straws at this point, and it still looks like they don't want to call any of the young kids up from Providence. I'll never get to the understanding why. I'm actually going to do a video on it next week based on a Dominic Tiano article just about Lysell and and how he's being handled. And I do think the Bruins need to figure out better development here. I think Blumel he played better against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks than he did the game before. But we'll see. They're going to need a lot of things to go their way for this to continue and the Boston Bruins to play a lot better hockey. They've got some tough games ahead of them. So we'll see. I don't think they can, but we'll see. Do you next question. Do you think the Bruins will be getting any new defensemen before the trade deadline? If yes, where should they be looking? They need to replace Henry Yukihiru. Worst defenseman on the team by far. It's actually between, if you look at the analytics, it's between Andrew Peeke will have an amazing game and then he'll be the worst defenseman on the team, but Yukihiru is consistently the worst defenseman. So they're going to need help and replace him. Who they're going to get, I don't know. They're going to be looking for someone to play in the bottom pair defense. They're not going to be looking at anybody to play up on the top. If they do, look at Rasmus Anderson and all that, but I just don't know if they have the pieces. If I'm the Boston Bruins right now, I'm not trading futures to bring in a guy. You don't want to make the mistake that Toronto Maple Leafs made years ago when they were in a rebuild and then they traded away everything to bring in Phil Kessel. And then they get into another rebuild and then they throw everything away so they can bring in Tavares and stuff like that. I think the Bruins need to stand pat. If they can get a guy for nothing, then sure. But I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea. Let's be honest here. I think Ty Anderson wrote an article today. Let me just throw it up here. So Ty Anderson wrote, the Bruins add some more organizational depth. So they have two people playing on a tryout with the Providence Bruins. That's Sean Element and a winger, Sean Element, and a defenseman, Christian Wolanin. Element's move to Providence comes after he'd been a strong start to his campaign for the ECHL Maine with 1 goal and 5 points in 6 games for the Maine Mariners. Prior to joining Maine, Element played for the current Bruins head coach Marco Sturm for the AHL Ontario Reign with 9 goals, 14 points in 64 games. And then Wolanin, meanwhile, joins the Bees organization after spending the last 3 seasons as a member of the Abbotsford Canucks. Last season, the left shot Wolanin posted 4 goals and 40 points in 58 regular season games for the Canucks and added 2 goals, 10 points in 17 playoff games for Abbotsford. Overall, the Quebec-born Wolanin posted 15 goals and 124 points in 149 games for Abbotsford. I think these guys are being brought in to help out in Providence because you've got Asparot and Callahan. I could be wrong. We'll see. You can't replace a guy like Charlie McAvoy. It just can't be done. So even with the trades, I say you figure out if you can get a young guy out of a team that's just not fitting in and possibly be the guy to take over that spot of Yukihiru, then maybe you do something like that. That's just my thoughts. It's a tough one. Like, honestly, at this point, I think the Bruins have a lot that they need to do. I think they have a lot that they need to fix, but we'll see. You let me know. Let me know in the comments what you think, because I think Sidorov has played phenomenal and he's going to miss Charlie McAvoy. I think that pair is great. I think Hampus Lindholm has played great. Andrew Peeke, like I said, he's got his ups and downs. The Bruins defense isn't that bad. I think their team defense, it's like they're Jekyll and Hyde. One game they're great, one game they're bad. I think Tanner Jeannot hasn't played that bad. I think that third line has been one of the Boston Bruins' most consistent lines with Kastelik, Jeannot, and Fraser Minton. By far, extremely consistent. And the first line, I think the Pasternak line has been great. I saw someone in the comments saying trade Pasternak over and over again. You know what? To each their own. You don't trade a guy like that. He's one of the elite players in the league, one of the best players in the league. The Boston Bruins aren't a bad team. They're not an elite team. They're just a good team. So I still think my prediction at the beginning of the year that they're going to flirt with possibly getting in the playoffs this year is still where they're at, which will still probably could net them a very high draft pick. A lot of people like it daily. Evan Marinofsky, if you follow him on Twitter, he posts where the Bruins could be in the lottery when we do a lottery pick every day to see where the Bruins could get a pick. I think today they were in first and the Leafs got like 8th. So in a perfect world, that would be amazing. But we'll see with this Boston Bruins team. We got some hockey to watch this weekend. They've been okay, but I want to hear from you. You let me know in the comments. everything we've talked about on this show. If you like this format, I possibly could do something like this with podcast, have some people come in, talk Bruins hockey. Maybe I'll do it once a week. Still do my videos. Like I said, I'm planning on doing a more in-depth video coming up next week, talking about the Boston Bruins development, all just based on Dominic Tiano's article. I read it and I thought it was phenomenal. And it kind of inspired me to talk more about the Bruins development and kind of do a deep dive into that. But let me know in the comments what you thought of this. As usual, click that like button, click that subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.